You know, it's kind of crazy to think about how long Disney has owned Star Wars now. We're talking 12, 13 years, and that means there's a whole generation of fans who only know Star Wars as a Disney product. To them, Star Wars has almost been exclusively tied to the sequel trilogy and to streaming content. But for those of us who remember what it was like before the acquisition, it was something entirely different, something more mysterious, more personal, and in my opinion, way more magical. And if I'm being honest, I really do miss that. So today, I want to talk about what Star Wars used to feel like, that mystery that it carried, that community that it built. And when it comes to Star Wars, I think that something important died the moment that Disney took over. Now, before we get started, I want to thank you all for watching, and if I could ask you a favor, if you can please like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow this channel as fast as I can. I try to put out as much opinionated Star Wars content as I possibly can, and I am trying to do this as weekly as possible. So if you could please give me a like and give me a subscribe and leave a comment down there with your opinions. I really do want to hear them, and every once in a while I do videos where I respond to those comments. So again, thanks for watching, and let's get to the video. There was a time when Star Wars was more than just content. It was a cultural event.
The Star Wars trilogy is back on the big screen, and it's even better with a Pepsi.
I've said before on this channel that one of the things that made Star Wars so great was that time that it took in between movies and the time that it took in between trilogies. It made it more epic, it made the viewers more patient. And even when it was just the 3 movies, episodes 4, 5, and 6, there was this massive shared feeling of wonder. The galaxy felt wide open. The stories were incomplete in the best way. We didn't even know what the Clone Wars were.
You fought in the Clone Wars?
Yes. I was once a Jedi Knight, the same as your father.
We didn't know how Anakin fell.
Obi-Wan once thought as you do. You don't know the power of the dark side.
And that not knowing, that whole shared feeling of not knowing what was going to come next, that was a huge part of the fun. It was ours, something passed around between fans through conversations, theories, and speculation.
Anakin has to be turned to the dark side. Yoda has to go into hiding. Obi-Wan Kenobi takes Luke to Tatooine to his brother.
Star Wars, for lack of a better word, was mysterious.
Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us.
It gave us just enough information to obsess over and let our imaginations fill in the gaps. Now, don't confuse what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that Star Wars stopped at the original trilogy. It grew for a long time, and that growth was really exciting. Take Heir to the Empire, or the entire trilogy from Timothy Zahn. That book was a massive deal. It sold something like, 15 million copies and gave people a sense that Star Wars wasn't done. The Shadows of the Empire event that went over the course of a couple of years was absolutely exciting. And if you were buying video games and reading books during that time, that was a really exciting time in Star Wars. It felt like Star Wars was back. It felt like Star Wars was expanding, and we didn't have a single movie or television show to speak of. It was this massive event that we all got to enjoy.
Shadows of the Empire. Look for the authentic figures and vehicles from Kenner.
And even during the time of the prequel trilogy, we had things like books, comics, toys, and eventually games like Knights of the Old Republic, which explored parts of the universe that the films hadn't even touched. Even if you weren't into the books, there was this growing fandom, this thing where everybody could be a part of at least something, like card games, action figures.
A new Star Wars movie is coming next summer, and a new Jedi Master can be yours. Get the first exclusive Episode 1 figure, Mace Windu.
Fan magazines, and eventually online forums. Star Wars wasn't just a movie franchise. It was a living, breathing mythology. And we treated it like one. We studied it, debated it, shared it. It was lore that mattered, even when it wasn't canon, because back then canon wasn't the sacred text curated by a corporation like it is today. It was more like a shared language among fans. When the prequels came out, it sparked a whole new era. And yeah, I'm gonna admit it, I think that most people now understand this. It was pretty divisive. A lot of Gen Xers hated the prequel trilogy. They still do. I think the majority of them still do. But love them or hate them, the prequels expanded the universe. They answered questions we've been asking for decades. We finally saw the Jedi at their height. We finally saw what the Clone Wars was. And we finally got to witness the fall of Anakin. And one of the most amazing and tragic things I've ever seen in the sci-fi genre was Order 66.
Execute Order 66.
And while the mystery did fade a little bit, and you have to admit that, because once you learn something, you do actually start to lose some of that mystery, the trade-off was worth it, because those movies were still George's vision. They had purpose, a consistency. Even if the execution was a little bit rocky at times, they still felt like Star Wars. And look, during that same time, the Clone Wars was starting to shape up into something special. It began as a rough little, very expensive side project that George and Dave Filoni were doing, but the later seasons of the Clone Wars, it was telling stories that were more emotionally resonant than most live-action TV shows of the time. And during that time, that 1977 to 2012 timeframe, we were in the golden age. 6 films, an expanding animated universe, beloved video games.
Rogue Group, we need to give our transports time to escape. Take out those Imperial probe droids.
And a treasure trove of books and comics, not to mention an enormous amount of action figures that were never discounted.
I will freeze your body in carbonite forever, Han Solo. Not so fast. You're next, Luke Skywalker.
All of it, every single piece was built on imagination, mystery, and a mythos that George created for the entire family. For those of us that weren't just casual fans of Star Wars, this era was a big deal. Knowing stuff like all the lightsaber forms, or debating on whether or not Mace Windu had fallen to the dark side during this scene, or whether or not Qui-Gon Jinn rightfully defied the Council, led to real conversations. These are things that didn't just get agreed upon in the kind of internet collective that we have today online, but these were things that you legitimately debated, things that you legitimately thought about, stuff that wasn't fully agreed upon yet. Channels like Star Wars Theory exploded because there was something to explore, something that wasn't fully mapped out yet. It felt like there was always one more secret to uncover, whether it was the Rule of Two or the origins of Darth Bane or the spiritual difference between the Jedi or the Sith. You could spend hours going down rabbit holes in the old EU, or watching YouTube videos explaining saber crystals or ancient Force philosophies, and it mattered because Star Wars still felt like a galaxy of stories waiting to be told. That era, when we were hungry to know more and every little detail carried weight, that era was special. Then came the buyout. When Disney acquired Lucasfilm, some of us were skeptical, but a lot of us were excited, and admittedly, I was too. The idea of the sequel trilogy was thrilling, and let's be real, the Force Awakens trailer, it's still an incredible trailer.
Chewie, we're home.
It gave me chills when it came out, and when the movie dropped, it made nearly $2 billion because, again, the majority of us were pretty excited about it. Everyone showed up. We were ready for the next chapter of being a fan, but we didn't really get one. Not really. Instead, what we got was this kind of weird mashup between nostalgia and studio interference. A trilogy that didn't know what it wanted to say, characters that never grew, arcs that didn't go anywhere, and an overwhelming sense that the people in charge didn't actually understand Star Wars at all. But one thing that they did understand was how to market it.
There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
With each new release, the mystery faded a little bit more. Releases like Rogue One and Andor, Rebels, and the new Timothy Zahn trilogy had a pretty good fan base, and there are a lot of people that like some of the things that Disney has made, but for the most part, Star Wars became just another content factory. It started checking boxes in just about every single way, appealing to focus groups, pushing agendas, or just existing because the machine needed fuel. And that's really when the magic died. Because the more they explained, the less we cared. The more they added, the less it felt like it mattered. Instead of thinking, I wonder what happens next, we started thinking, oh no, what are they gonna f***ing ruin this time? And look, I know some people still enjoy the shows, but the conversations changed. We went from what if to what now. The debates turned into complaints, and the excitement became skepticism, and the hope was gone. By the time that commentators started to say that Star Wars felt like homework rather than something that you were hoping to watch every single week was when it was already too late. And look, let's be honest, I think that hindsight's 2020, there's a reason why people say that ignorance is bliss. Sometimes not knowing is better. And look, recently The Drinker had brought up Firefly, and it's kind of made it popular to talk about again. And I've always loved Firefly. It only had a short run plus one movie, what is it, like 14 or 15 episodes, and people still say that they want more. But if they brought it back now, let's be honest, it'd probably be awful. Not knowing is kind of a part of the fun. I mean, I watch Firefly probably once a year, and it still has that magic, it still has that wonder. And sure, I would have loved to have had a few more seasons back when it was being made, but any more now would just hurt the show more than it would help it. I trade everything that Disney gave us. I'd trade all of the terrible shows, all of the terrible movies, but I'd even trade the good stuff. I'd trade Rebels, which I love. I'd trade Andor seasons 1 and 2 and Rogue One. And I'd even trade Timothy Zahn's Thrawn novels, which are probably the best thing that's been made by Disney so far, just to be able to have it all back. Just to be able to have a universe that's only told by George Lucas. Just to be able to have episodes 1 through 6 as our canon, and Clone Wars and the video games and the books as the extended universe that we all could create our own headcanons from. Because that mystery, that gap between what we knew and what we dreamed about, that was the magic. Because once we saw everything, once they filled in all the blanks, we lost something that we can never get back. So yeah, I miss it. I miss when Star Wars gave us hope. I miss when the future of the galaxy was uncertain in the best possible way. I miss the deep dives, I miss the books, I miss the games, I miss the forums, I miss the theories. I even miss when the action figures were always expensive. I miss being a part of something special, something shared but not corporate, something mysterious but meaningful, something that made you feel like a kid again. And look, maybe Disney can continue to try to make great things like they did with Andor Season 2. But for me, the best parts of Star Wars live in that time before Disney owned it, a time when we didn't know what was coming, and that made it all the more magical. First of all, I want to say that I'm sorry for being a little bit late. I had a lot of stuff come up this week, and I have another channel that I edit for, and sometimes it takes me a little more time than I want it to in order to get the videos made. So I apologize for being about a week and a half late on this video. I want to start a segment. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it every single week because I don't think I have a big enough fan base for it, but I want to do a new segment where you as the viewer tells the rest of the audience how it is that you feel about a particular subject. Here is this week's. This comes from Psychedelic Dude. I asked him, he reached out to me and asked if he could put something up, and I told him absolutely, this sounds like a great idea. And he asked me what the subject was going to be this week, and I told him it was going to be the time before Disney. And this is what it is he has to say.
Star Wars has always been part of my life. I can't even remember the first time I watched any of the 6 original movies, maybe except for Revenge of the Sith, but even that is vague. It was never revealed to me that Vader was Luke's father. It's just something I've always known, because of references and parodies and stuff. What made me fall in love with Star Wars as a kid was the story of the lightsabers, the Force, and all the mystery. The mystery was significant before we got anything more than the 6 movies. It increased my imagination as I always wanted more story. And back then I didn't know about the EU, and I thought the Clone Wars was a kid's show. Regarding the EU, I grew up in Norway. Our selection of comics and stuff was not great. We had Spider-Man comics in our grocery stores, and as far as I know, that was pretty much it. But perhaps headcanon was even more relevant back then, since we were forced to make up our own stuff. But back then, headcanon was a thing because we lacked Star Wars. Now it's a thing because Star Wars kinda sucks. And we need to use our imagination to mentally maneuver around the things that we feel like spoils the story. One of my favorite Star Wars things ever is Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy, the video games. Mostly because of the really fun gameplay that makes you feel like a Jedi, but also because of how Luke and his successful Jedi Order was portrayed. And successful is kind of the key word here. As kids, me and my Star Wars friends would imagine what happened after Return of the Jedi. We never imagined Luke failing. Not because it was unrealistic, but because it really wasn't interesting, and we felt like it would retroactively ruin the entire saga. Personally, I craved a story set after Return of the Jedi. That wasn't a video game, and I knew someone would one day make sequels, but I never knew that they would defile everyone's expectation of what happened after Return of the Jedi. When it was announced that Disney would buy Lucasfilms, I actually trusted them. And there were so many great Disney classics, and the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy was great, so I thought it would be good. But alas, they failed us and themselves.
So if you want to be a part of this, please send me your video or your audio. Keep it down to about 1 to 2 minutes and make sure that it's about Star Wars, or at least it's akin to Star Wars. Maybe it's a response to this video, or maybe it's a response to another video that I made in the past. Just let me know, send it to me, and thank you so much for watching. I'm the Germexican. I hope I've earned your subscription today, and I'll see you next time.